Reasoning, when we talk about, is the heart of CLAT. Legal reasoning having 40 marks out of 150 matters so much on the D-Day. The question is, we need to have a fair idea about what can CLAT test on the D-Day. So logical evening, everyone. Good to see your messages. Let's go ahead and have discussions. And before I begin the sessions, there are a lot of paid cockroaches who come out from all the filthy places and make some comments. Don't pay attention towards them. Focus on our work. Our work is a good work. Let's keep doing good work and let's understand things. All right. We are here for the work. Going ahead, why this session today? Because competitive exams are about being relatively better than your competitors. And when I say so, we need to understand that 80% of questions come from 20% of areas. I repeat, 80% of questions come from 20% of those areas. In last few days, for a subject like legal reasoning, you need to have a checklist. एक चेकलिस्ट होना चाहिए कि ये सारे टॉपिक तो मेरे को आते हैं. If you're knowing those topics, that will have your confidence in, and then you should break into CLAT. So this session, we'll try to understand which are those 20% topics which are tested 80% times in the exam. All right. Before that, going ahead with today's session, let us understand the flow of session. The first thing first, legal reasoning, what is tested. In the first part, we'll discuss what is tested. Exam में आता क्या है? Vidhigya had a very different way of looking at legal reasoning. We'll be talking about what is tested. Number two, we need to understand what CLAT has already tested in the year 2020 and in the year 2021, because till 2019 the pattern was different. In the year 2020 the pattern changed. So in this new pattern of CLAT, where paragraphs are being given, passages are being given, and the questions are being asked, what is the trend? What kind of questions are tested, and what we should be prepared? You know, the best thing about CLAT is the element of surprise. The only thing predictable about CLAT, I always say before exam that CLAT is unpredictable. But the idea is, in legal reasoning section, if your domain of pre-known is wide, your ability to answer on the D-Day becomes better. You understand 120 minutes for 150 questions are less. But the people, those who make it large on the D-Day, they have a wide domain of topics already known, pre-known, so that once it comes to comprehension, they are faster. In the light of this, let's go into the session. The session would be in 4 parts. Number 1, legal reasoning, what is tested. Number 2, analyzing CLAT 2020. Number 3, analyzing CLAT 2021. Number 4, the most expected topics of CLAT 2022. With that point settled, I think it's good to go ahead. Part 1, legal reasoning, what is tested. First of all, let's understand the question stem. When you talk about question stem, कितने तरह के क्वेश्चंस आते हैं, किस तरीके से क्वेश्चंस बनते हैं. एक पैसेज होगा, उस पैसेज में कैसा क्वेश्चन हो सकता है. नंबर 1, एप्लीकेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन. उस पैसेज में जो आपने लर्निंग ली है उसे एक फैक्चुअल सिचुएशन पे अप्लाई करेंगे आप, और आंसर करना है आपको व्हाट इज मोस्ट अप्रोप्रिएट इन द आईज ऑफ लॉ, इन द आईज ऑफ लॉ प्रोवाइडेड टू यू. सो ये हो गया एप्लीकेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन. दूसरे क्वेश्चंस हो गए इन्फरेंस बेस्ड क्वेश्चन. यू रीड द एंटायर पैसेज, यू गेट टू अंडरस्टैंड समथिंग, एंड विद योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग यू नीड टू ड्रॉ inferences as to which inferences are rightly drawn and which inferences are not. Number 3, there are direct fact based questions as well, which lowers the difficulty level of exam and helps you make some quick marks. So these are the kind of questions, if we take both years, these are the kind of question stems which are visible. Going ahead, बड़ा क्वेश्चन, लीगल रीजनिंग सेक्शन इन क्लैट. क्या पढ़ना होता है एग्जाम के लिए? पढ़ना क्या होता है? सबसे पहले बेसिक लीगल कॉन्सेप्ट्स. बेसिक लीगल कॉन्सेप्ट्स में कॉन्सेप्ट्स विच आर जनरल प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, ऑफ क्रिमिनल लॉ, ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन एंड ऑफ टॉर्ट्स. बेसिक थिंग. Number 2, legal terms, and I also include legal maxims here. Number 3, static legal GK. Yes, we had topics. We had res judicata last year, 2021 it was. We had concept of res judicata being tested. So yes, of course, static legal GK important है. All those champions say कि नहीं आता, ऐसा होता है, वैसा होता है, वगैरह वगैरह. Legal GK important नहीं है, constitution important नहीं है. Look at the CLAT passages, look at the research, and then we should make generalizations. राइट. एंड द फोर्थ थिंग इज कंटेम्प्रेरी लीगल डेवलपमेंट. ये 4 कंपोनेंट्स हैं और यही पढ़ने का तरीका है एट विधिज्ञ. एट विधिज्ञ वी इंश्योर दैट दिस इज द वे वी लर्न. Otherwise it's pointless. अगर हम लोग बोले legal is torts, contract and criminal law, we say that it's a very narrow way of looking at legal reasoning. खैर, the first topic is the basic legal concepts. इसमें क्या, law of torts, सारे important topics समझ में आना चाहिए, apply करते आना चाहिए, that is tested. Number 2, basics of contract, all the things, agreement, legal enforceability, specific contracts समझ में आना चाहिए. Third, general principles of criminal law, must know. They have been widely tested. Fourth, basics of constitution. A lot of people argue कि constitution नहीं आता. अरे look at CLAT 2020, look at CLAT 2021 आया है और आपको मालूम होना चाहिए. So in the session today, later we'll be discussing कि इसके अंदर क्या, torts में क्या important है, contract में क्या important है, criminal law में क्या important है और constitution में क्या important है. We'll be discussing. Going ahead, the important legal terms. Now please understand, the speed of comprehension is best when the legal terms are pre-known. पहले से legal terms पता है तो आप comprehend जल्दी कर पाते हैं. एक maxim लिखा है, nemo judex in causa sua, अगर ऐसा लिखा है और आपको पहले से ही पता है nemo मतलब नहीं, judex judge, in sua मतलब own, causa मतलब cause. No one can be a judge in his own cause. अच्छा, ये तो पता है मुझे. अब comprehension fast हो जाएगा comparing with a person who could not comprehend it equally good, right? And मैक्सिम्स, टॉर्ट्स, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, क्रिमिनल लॉ के जो बेसिक्स हैं, जैसे हम टॉर्ट्स की बात करें तो रेस इप्सा लॉक्यूटर, डैमनम सिने इंजुरिया, इंजुरिया सिने डैमनम. क्रिमिनल लॉ की बात करें, डोला इनकेपैक्स, मेंस रिया, एक्टस नॉन फेसिट रियम, निसी मेंसिट रिया, डी मिनिमस नॉन क्यूरेट लेक्स. ऐसी बेसिक चीजें तो पता होनी ही चाहिए. ऑलराइट, देन स्टैटिक लीगल जीके. अब स्टैटिक लीगल जीके में कौन से कॉन्सेप्ट्स आ गए, एडीआर, ट्रेडमार्क, नेचुरल जस्टिस वगैरह वगैरह, ऐसे टॉपिक. तो पहले हमने बोला बेसिक लीगल कॉन्सेप्ट्स, दूसरा हमने देखा लीगल टर्म्स, तीसरा हमने देखा स्टैटिक लीगल जीके और चौथा हमने देखा कंटेम्पररी लीगल डेवलपमेंट्स. These are the 4 components of legal reasoning section in CLAT like exam or any other law entrance exam for that matter in India at this given point in time. Second part is, let's analyze CLAT 2020. CLAT 2020 पहला ऐसा साल था जहां पर things changed. CLAT 2020 पहला ऐसा साल था जहां पहली बार पैराग्राफ बेस्ड questions आए which were tested in exam. कितने question थे, 39 question थे. You know, CLAT says 25% is legal reasoning, but in 2020 we had 39 questions and in 2021 we had 40 questions. All right, कैसे निकालेंगे 25% of 150, है ना? तो 75 में इंग्लिश और 75 में जीके और लीगल रीजनिंग दोनों हो जाता है. So they give 35 usually to GK and 40 to legal reasoning, and legal reasoning is important breaking tie. Legal reasoning is important having the highest weightage. तो important है, देखते हैं. और history has been evident. Vidhigyans have scored above 34-35 marks, so it's scoreable, it's doable. Have good appetite, just go for it, make it large. That's how it is. CLAT 2020 देखते हैं. CLAT 2020 में टोटल पैसेजेस कितने थे, 8 पैसेजेस थे. एक था फोर्स मेजर पे. अब फोर्स मेजर उस साल बहुत न्यूज में था. कहां पे, क्या बोल सकते हैं, इसे बोल सकते हैं कंटेम्पररी लीगल डेवलपमेंट. दूसरा ऑब्ससिनिटी पे था, ये प्योर एक क्रिमिनल लॉ का टॉपिक हो गया. तीसरा पॉल्यूटर पे प्रिंसिपल तो था लेकिन दे वर रेफरिंग टू स्ट्रिक्ट लायबिलिटी, तो हम बोल सकते हैं कंटेम्पररी था लेकिन रिलेटेड टू लॉ ऑफ टॉर्ट्स था. फोर्थ, प्रिंसिपल ऑफ नेचुरल जस्टिस वाज टेस्टेड. प्रिंसिपल ऑफ नेचुरल जस्टिस वाज टेस्टेड एंड इट वाज प्योरली अ लीगल जीके पैसेज. फिफ्थ, वो पालघर वाला जो इंसिडेंस हुआ था, that was tested, and this is contemporary legal development for sure. Then a criminal law topic called common intention and similar intention was tested, and that was criminal law section. And article 3219 and concept of FIR, so constitution basically with a tinge of CRPC was tested. And finally constitution का core topic article 20 clause 1 protection against ex post facto law. तो हमारे पास constitution के 2, क्रिमिनल लॉ का 1 और एक कंटेम्पररी डेवलपमेंट का, ये यहाँ पे 4 पैसेजेस, और बाकी 4 पैसेजेस में क्रिमिनल लॉ का 1, कंटेम्पररी लीगल डेवलपमेंट के 2 और लीगल जीके का 1. सो दिस वाज CLAT 2020. ये उनके टॉपिक्स थे. और यहाँ पे इंपॉर्टेंट है, आप वर्ड्स देखिए, 486 और 454, ये 2 पैसेजेस वर लेंथी, रेस्ट आर नॉट लेंथी, दे आर एज स्मॉल एज 223. सो द क्वेश्चन इज, क्या कॉम्प्रिहेंडेबल है, क्या 8 अटेम्प्ट हो पाएंगे? बिल्कुल हो पाएंगे, हो जाएगा. You know, Vidhigya mocks have been harsh. They have taken a toll on your lives, right? But if you have prepared yourself so rigorously, I think CLAT will not disappoint you. You go and play the champion's way. Go, hit and hit it hard. All right. So Let's analyze the third part of today's discussion. Today's session is analyzing CLAT 2021. When I talk about CLAT 2021, क्या था इसमें? We had 40 questions here, and in these 40 questions, there were 8 passages. And in these 8 passages, the first one. Now, CLAT 2020 had a huge weightage of contemporary legal development. And we saw a departure from that rule in CLAT 2021. Let's look at the passages. The first passage is a pure passage of law of torts, voluntary non-fit injuria. The second passage was purely a passage of contract, the concept of free consent. The third one is again law of contract, which is postal rule, communication of offer and acceptance. Fourth one, again, law of contract, agreement and restraint of legal proceedings. Fifth one, the principle of res judicata, purely a legal GK question. Purely a legal GK question. Sixth one was a generic interpretation of a passage which has some legal knowledge in it, and that was about compassionate appointment. Then passage seventh was about bigamy laws, again matrimonial laws and IPC, and the last one was consent under Indian Penal Code. So we had 2 basically on criminal law, we had 2 on core legal GK, we had 3 on contract, and we had 1 on torts. No passage from contemporary legal development in 2021. Interesting है. फिर से number of words देखते हैं. Passage 1 was 444 words. Mind well, 444 words. लेकिन बाद में देखो 391 words, 258 words, as low as 242 words, then 375 words. We had the shortest passage on compassionate appointment to 235 words, 400 and 415. So please understand, not all the passages are of 450, 400 plus words. They're small passages as well. But again, don't go by the length of passage per se. At times, it's about question and it's about the whether you pre-know the topic. If you pre-know the topic, बड़ा पैसेज हो जाएगा. पहले से टॉपिक नहीं पता है तो कभी छोटा भी परेशान कर सकता है. Appearances are often deceptive. Don't go by them. Alright? चलिए अब आ जाते हैं आज के इंपॉर्टेंट काम पे. Part 4, most expected topics for CLAT 2022. Why this? Just a checklist कि ये सारे टॉपिक्स इन सारे सब्जेक्ट्स में हमें आने चाहिए, नहीं आने ही चाहिए. We must know them. So having that point settled, चलिए फटाफट देखते हैं. Starting with static and contemporary legal GK, what you must know. Number 1, the principles of natural justice. इसमें क्या? Audi alteram partem. No party can be condemned unheard. Every party shall be afforded a reasonable opportunity of being heard. Then, nemo judex in causa sua. No one can be a judge in his own cause. Rule against bias, है ना? Then, ADR, alternative dispute resolution. इसमें arbitration, mediation, conciliation, and arbitration के ऊपर we see a lot of things happening across this year, है ना? Majorly वो Reliance and Amazon, loggerhead. So and then again, Can India, Permanent Court of Arbitration. So arbitration remains a keyword, and we should basically understand ADR and law of arbitration. The bare minimum of it should be clear in our mind, right? Going ahead, then we should see the concept of free legal aid as it is under basically Article 39A, read with Legal Services Authority Act, right? हमें पता होना चाहिए why there is a concept, what do they intend, what are the criteria, so we can expect some questions there. Next is the concept of plea bargain. What you should know which cases are suitable, where it is applicable, where it is not applicable, how it is applicable, and what is the crux of this topic. So this is what something that you must know when it comes to plea bargain. Going ahead, I have a feeling that when we're talking about contemporary and static legal GK topics, then I think POXCO, and rights of children is somewhere, that may be tested. Consumer Protection Act has amended in 2019. In 2020 and 2021, we did not see a question on that. There is a probability asking the jurisdiction of District Consumer Forum, of State Commission, and of National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. There might be a question coming in, and there might be new things introduced in 2019 Act as to the liability of intermediaries online e-commerce websites. So these are the areas which we should have a fair idea, मालूम होना चाहिए, so that when the passage comes to us, we can interpret that well. Going ahead, intellectual property rights have been evergreen. Since 2009, we see questions in CLAT coming from IPR, and I think you must understand what is the basis of intellectual property. You need to understand what is a trademark. You need to have a crystal clarity that trademark is only with respect to a producer. No, it serves twofold purpose. One, it helps a producer distinguish his goods from another. Two, it avoids a consumer confusion as well. So, trademark. What can be registered as trademark? What cannot be registered as trademark? And if a trademark is infringed, there are two things: suit of infringement, and if the trademark is registered, then the suit for infringement, and if the trademark is not registered, then a passing of action. Bare minimum. Right now, IPR is quite close to me. If I go talking, I'll talk at length, so I'll cut down myself right now, but these are the basic things that you must know. Copyright, in which all works the copyright subsists, what is the tenure of protection, and what is something called fair use. Like when this copyrighted material is used for educational, defense, scientific purposes, then we call it fair use, and it is an exception under the Copyright Act itself. If I'm not wrong, section 52, right? Third thing, you should be knowing about patent. Now the question is, what can be patented? Product or process? What should it have? It should have novelty, utility, and non-obviousness. What cannot be patented? And more importantly, with COVID so much so in news, the concept of compulsory licensing. These are the things that you should be knowing when it comes to patents. And with reference to geographical indications, basics पता होना चाहिए. और geographical indication का question अगर GK section में भी आ जाए, इस साल किन सब चीजों को geographical indication tags मिले हैं, तो पता होना चाहिए. ये GK relevant topic भी है, GI. ठीक है? Then अगेन स्टैटिक और कंटेम्प्रेरी लीगल जीके में जो पैसेजेस आ सकते हैं वो कौन से टॉपिक होंगे? दिस इज 498A. 498A क्रुएलिटी, बेसिकली डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस अगेंस्ट वुमेन, उनके अगेंस्ट में एक लॉ भी है, द डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस एक्ट. बट 498A बेसिकली डील्स विद क्रुएलिटी अगेंस्ट वुमेन. वी शुड नो दैट इट इंक्लूड्स फिजिकल एज वेल एज मेंटल एट्रीब्यूट्स, सो ऑन सो फोर्थ. When husband is liable, when his family members are liable, when they are not liable, what kind of evidence is used, वगैरह वगैरह. Right? Then right to privacy and data protection, this is important. And when we come to a topic like, see, this is important. If you try to understand a topic like evidence, so you should know what is burden of proof. This is something which is basically you should know. The concept of confession, burden of proof, the concept of confession, and 7 years if a person is not being heard. For a period of 7 years, if a person is not being heard, he shall be presumed dead. So presumption of death. So basically, these are few things that we should know. And then prevention of sexual harassment at workplace, right to privacy, and data protection. Data protection and right to privacy more fully after K.S. Puttaswamy judgment. So these are the important topics which I think static and contemporary legal GK we should be knowing. Going ahead, what are the most important topics? Basics of criminal law. So when you talk about the basics of criminal law, what are most important topics there? So the first one is, again, going serially, क्रिमिनल लॉ अगर आपने क्विक रिवीजन करना है तो ये पॉइंट्स एटलीस्ट देख लेना, ये मिनिमम पता होना चाहिए. वेरी पैरेटो प्रिंसिपल को अप्लाई करते हुए अगर रीजनेबली रैशनली देखें तो दे आर द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स दैट वन शुड बी नोइंग. 1. Attempt and preparation. 2. All general exceptions under Indian Penal Code, especially right of private defense and acts of child, the concept of dola incapax, right? Then actus non facet reum nisi mens rea और actus reus पता होना चाहिए. Law of sedition, it was not tested in 2020, 2021. I still think, and I've given and explained to everybody out there that this topic is having potential of being tested in law entrance exams more fully in CLAT 2022. So again, this topic, sedition, is important. You should know everything about it. Vidhigya ka explained पढ़ लेना, I think that will help you most. Then dowry death and homicide. Then concept of abatement. Importantly, concept of marital rape. A lot of hue and cry in the world about this offense right now. Then the concept of adultery. Now, adultery is being held unconstitutional in the case of Joseph Shine, but there is a probability that it might be tested. Then concept of unnatural offenses, in that what can be tested? When we talk about the concept of unnatural offenses, that is 377 IPC, homosexuality is decriminalized, but bestiality is not. So this is where a good question and a good line of question can be framed. Pura 377 decriminalized nahi hua hai. A part of it which deals with homosexuality is decriminalized. Going ahead, you should also be understanding the concept of wrongful restraint, wrongful confinement. Most importantly, the concept of, where you understand the difference more than the conceptual difference between theft, criminal breach of trust, and dishonest misappropriation of property. Dishonest misappropriation of property, criminal breach of trust, and theft. You need to understand the difference crystal clear. Going ahead, talking about Constitution of India. In Constitution, what are the topics that you cannot afford to leave? 1. Article 12, that is state. Question might come that fundamental rights are enforceable against state. The definition of state as provided in Article 12 is X. So you should be in position to understand what is definition of state under Article 12, and you should know that all that is not covered under Article 12, against them the petition is not maintainable. The writ petition for violation of fundamental right is not maintainable against the private parties who are not covered within the ambit of Article 12 of the Constitution. ये पता होना चाहिए. रिट जुरिस्डिक्शन पता होना चाहिए. हाई कोर्ट का अंडर 226 और सुप्रीम कोर्ट का अंडर 32. 226 जुरिस्डिक्शन में आप लीगल राइट, फंडामेंटल राइट दोनों वायलेशन के लिए जा सकते हैं. लेकिन अगर हम बात करें बहुत सीरियस नोट पे ऑफ 32, तो 32 का jurisdiction is narrow only for violation of fundamental rights. So the jurisdiction of Supreme Court under Article 32 is narrow than the jurisdiction of High Court under Article 226. We should have crystal clarity. Going ahead, you should understand right to equality as enshrined under Article 14, 15 and 16, and exceptions, that is reservation. You need to understand this reservation, which is also known as one of the ways of affirmative actions. All right. Going ahead, Article 20, Clause 1, Clause 2, Clause 3. I have a strong bias that a passage should be there. We already had one on Article 20, Clause 1. Article 20, Clause 1 is protection against ex post facto law. Article 20, Clause 2 is protection against double jeopardy. Article 20, Clause 3 is protection against self-incrimination. Article 20, Clause 2, Article 20, Clause 3 is a big probability of featuring out in 2022 CLAT. Let me have my neck out and say Article 20, Clause 2, Clause 3 should be very well done with all the students who are planning to take CLAT in just a few days. Don't miss it. Going ahead, anti-defection and the concept of federalism. Nowadays, we talk about the concept of cooperative federalism. We talk about a concept where, you know, the federalism is in danger, where an authoritative union is just not giving the due to the states and working against the concept of federalism. So these are the few basic things, you know, which you should know. Cooperative federalism, center state relations, 7th schedule वगैरह वगैरह, तो पता होना ही चाहिए. List 1 पे parliament makes law, list 2 पे state legislature makes law, list 3 concurrent list पे both make laws. Schedule के बारे में basic जानकारी होना चाहिए, and Supreme Court और उसकी jurisdiction पता होना चाहिए. You need to understand original jurisdiction क्या है. You need to understand appellate jurisdiction क्या है. You need to understand special leave petition क्या है. You need to understand advisory jurisdiction where president seeks advice from Supreme Court क्या है. You should also understand जो पहले हमने बोला Article 32 writ jurisdiction of Supreme Court. There's a word called epistolary jurisdiction. That just writing a letter to Supreme Court can be treated suo motu as a petition. So again, we need to know these things. In my opinion, हमने अभी बात कर ली interestingly स्टैटिक और कंटेम्पररी लीगल जीके के टॉपिक्स की. हमने बात की कॉन्सेप्ट्स ऑफ क्रिमिनल लॉ की. वी हैव आल्सो टेस्टेड विद द इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ इंडिया, अ चेकलिस्ट फॉर एवरीबॉडी टेकिंग क्लैट. ऑलराइट, एंड यस, टॉकिंग अबाउट contract heavy paper in 2021. Wow, anyone who has done contract well was enjoying life, most probably in one of the best NLUs. So therefore contract is one of the most tested area in law entrance exams, be it CLAT, be it ALET. be it SLAT, be it any law entrance exam whatsoever. So when you talk about law of contract, what you should know. Law of contract is a technical subject. You need to have crystal clarity about it. When I talk about contract, you need to understand what is offer and acceptance and all the rules governing offer and acceptance. यहाँ पे clarity होनी ही चाहिए. Second thing, you should understand cross offer, counter offer and general offer. Bare minima ये तो पता होना ही चाहिए. You need to understand consideration. Now consideration है ना, when at the desire of the promise, ये जो definition भी है ना लिखिए 2D में, वो definition भी आ जाए तो interpret करना आना चाहिए. At Vidhigi we have always done that. हमने उस definition को लिखा पढ़ा और फिर समझा. When at the desire of the promiser, promise you or any other person has done or abstain from doing, does or abstains from doing, promises to do or abstain from doing such act or abstinence is called consideration. है ना, ये सब बेसिकली छोटी छोटी बातें जस्ट हमने लेकिन उस डेफिनेशन के अंदर से सारे कंसिडरेशन की इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें निकाली थी. पास्ट कंसिडरेशन, प्रेजेंट कंसिडरेशन, वैलिड कंसिडरेशन वगैरह वगैरह. ऑल दो 7 रूल्स दैट वी डन विद कंसिडरेशन आर इंपॉर्टेंट. देन कंसिडरेशन के साथ ही आपको पता होना चाहिए कि past voluntary service or gift is an exception जहां agreement without consideration is also valid. Then ये past voluntary service is very important. Then free consent पता होना चाहिए. तो contract says when a consent is not free, if it is obtained by coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation. I tell you that you need to have crystal clarity about the difference between fraud and misrepresentation. There is a likelihood that these areas, they are CLAT favorite. You might figure out a question on that. All right. Then undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, coercion, nothing can be given a go by. You should understand very well. Then agreement with minor. Agreement with minor is important. There are 5-7 facets to it. Agreement with minor is void, where minor is beneficiary. है ना, all those situations. मोहरी बीवी versus धर्मोदास वाले जो situations हैं वो मालूम होना चाहिए. Then agreement and restraint of trade and profession. Agreement and restraint of legal proceedings. Agreement and restraint of legal proceedings last year CLAT में आया था. अभी agreement and restraint of trade and profession, agreement and restraint of marriage, agreements against public policy, they all are void. तो basically ये पता होना चाहिए. साथ साथ contract में हमें specific contract like what we must be knowing is contract of bailment. All right, contract of guarantee, and most importantly quasi contract. ये बेसिक चीजें पता होनी ही चाहिए. All right, I just thought that these two areas, quasi contract, there's no actual contract but obligations are like contract. This is why this is called quasi contract. पता होना चाहिए. Bailment पता होना चाहिए. Pledge पता होना चाहिए. Guarantee पता होनी चाहिए. Basic things that you must know. ये words भी पता होना चाहिए. Pledge, when you keep your movable property as a security, right? वो पूरा concept. I hope you remember. ठीक है? So these are the areas that you must know. अब चलते हैं simple law of torts. Law of torts में क्या? Basically injuria sine damnum, damnum sine injuria. लास्ट ईयर वॉलेंटाइन ऑन फिट इंजुरिया पे आ चुका है केस. तो वीएनएफआई, एक्ट ऑफ गॉड, प्लेंटिफ द रॉन्ग डूअर, नेसेसिटी, राइट ऑफ प्राइवेट डिफेंस, इनएविटेबल एक्सीडेंट एंड मिस्टेक्स, दे आर बेसिकली कॉल्ड जनरल डिफेंसेस. पूरे अच्छे से आना ही चाहिए. देन समथिंग कॉल्ड नो फॉल्ट लाइबिलिटी, जहां पे हम यूके में पढ़ते हैं रायलैंड वर्सेस फ्लेचर, वेयर द रूल ऑफ स्ट्रिक्ट लाइबिलिटी कम्स. एंड व्हेन वी रीड श्रीराम फर्टिलाइजर्स केस, दैट इज एमसी मेहता वर्सेस यूनियन ऑफ इंडिया, अबाउट एब्सोल्यूट लाइबिलिटी एज इट इवॉल्व्ड इन इंडिया. I think strict liability was tested in CLAT 2020. Still, there's a huge scope that these areas of torts, they may be tested in this exam as well. So again, public nuisance, private nuisance, liability of state in torts. So state is liable for non-sovereign functions. State is not liable for sovereign functions. There was a case, है ना, कस्तूरी लाल केस, पुलिस वाला सोना लेके भाग गया, है ना, वो वाला केस. डोंट फॉरगेट, इंपॉर्टेंट है. देन कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ नेग्लिजेंस, ड्यूटी ऑफ केयर, दैट ड्यूटी वाज ब्रीच्ड, हाउ मच केयर, रीजनेबल केयर वगैरह वगैरह. रिमेंबर. देन कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ ट्रेसपास. Concept of trespass is equal to injuria sine damnum, right? And again, concept of battery, assault and false imprisonment. Let me tell, I have a bias that these topics must be crystal clear to every student. There's a probability they may be tested. And again, वाइकेरियस लाइबिलिटी पे लास्ट 2 सालों में क्वेश्चन नहीं आया that master is liable for the wrongful act done by the servant, principal is liable for the wrongful act done by the agent, partners are liable for wrongful act done by each other partners during the course of employment, during the course of agency and during the for furthering the business of the firm respectively. ये तीन चीजें पता होना चाहिए. And again, tort of malicious prosecution, this is something that you must know. Wow, we are done. तो फटाफट एक बार देख लेते हैं हमने क्या क्या क्या. You should have clarity. पार्ट 4 मोस्ट एक्सपेक्टेड टॉपिक्स में हमने देखा, एक चेकलिस्ट बनाई कि कंटेम्पररी और स्टैटिक लीगल जीके में जो पैसेजेस आए हैं क्योंकि 2020 2021 में, व्हाट आर द एरियाज दैट यू मस्ट नो. आई डिड नॉट मेक अ ह्यूज लिस्ट बट आई मेड दैट दिस इज बेयर मिनिमम. ये तो पता होना चाहिए, ये पता होगा तो कॉन्फिडेंस रहेगा, कॉन्फिडेंस होगा तो फोड़ क्या हो गए. ये लिस्ट कैसे बनाई है? ये लिस्ट बनाई है ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ प्रिंसिपल कॉल्ड पैरेटो प्रिंसिपल. ऑलराइट, देन basics of criminal law, these are the topics. Basics of constitution, these are the topics, and we had questions tested on constitution. So anybody believing कि यार constitution तो नहीं आता is a fool, is living in a fool's paradise. All right. And then again, contract. Last year 2021 was a contract heavy exam. All right. So again, we expect some questions coming and all the important topics. I missed out a few, so I've written quasi contract, pledge, bailment and guarantee. At least this should also be done. All right. एंड देन लॉ ऑफ टॉर्ट्स. ये एरिया कर लिया तो क्लैट के लिए शांति है, आराम से पेपर लिखो, एंजॉय करो. नेक्स्ट थिंग, लास्ट मिनट टिप्स. अब तो मैंने आपसे बोला था 34-35 मार्क्स लाए जा सकते हैं, लोग लाए हैं, मतलब जा सकते क्या, लाए हैं, हर साल लाए. सो इट्स पॉसिबल, यू कैन डू इट. फटाफट रिवाइज कर लो और ये कॉन्सेप्ट्स के बारे में तो श्योर होना, हर लॉ में कम से कम इतना तो आना चाहिए, मतलब दिस इज बेयर मिनिमा, इतना आ जाए. लास्ट दिन अगर 2 दिन देखना है कि ये मेरे टॉपिक्स हो गए तो आई थिंक दैट इज गुड एक्सरसाइज. दूसरा, एग्जाम वाले दिन यू नीड टू सीक्वेंस ऑल योर सेक्शंस. इंग्लिश कब लेना है, क्रिटिकल लॉजिकल रीजनिंग कब लेना है, जीके कब लेना है, मैथ्स कब लेना है, यू नो ऑल व्हाट योर मेंटर्स से, आप जहां भी पढ़ते हैं, जो भी पढ़ते हैं, आपके जो मेंटर्स ने बताया उनके हिसाब से आप समझ के आप ले सकते हैं, डिपेंडिंग ऑन योर स्ट्रेंथ्स एंड वीकनेसेस. आई हैव अ बायस and again Vidhigyans have a different way of doing it, so that's okay. Next, for legal reasoning passages, understand skimming के time पे offset is of utility and yes, apply well the ISS part, right? Fourth thing, what you should be doing, adhere the upper time limit. If you are solving all 8 passages, since you have ISS in place, so you'll have 8 passages to go. I believe that while you're doing these 8 passages, you need to have a maximum cap of 40 minutes, which says that every 5 minutes you should be doing one passage. So that's a good way of keeping track on time. Then read well the terms. The times, you know, question में वो term आता है except, not, which is not untrue आ गया. So 2 negatives means true. So we should be keeping our eyes. And this term, notwithstanding anything, मतलब ओवरराइडिंग इफेक्ट. अब कुछ भी लिखा कोई मतलब नहीं, नॉट विथ स्टैंडिंग एनीथिंग. तो ऐसे टर्म्स इंटरप्रेट करना आना चाहिए. और सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट बात है लीगल रीजनिंग है. एक तो लैंग्वेज, ऊपर से लॉ की समझ और एप्लीकेशन. तो मजेदार सब्जेक्ट है, नंबर लाने वाला सब्जेक्ट है, खूब नंबर लाते हैं बच्चे, आप भी लाओगे 2022 में, चिंता की बात नहीं है. फोकस्ड होके, माइंडफुल होके, स्ट्रेस के बिना, शांति से, समझते हुए, लेकिन स्पीड मेंटेन करते हुए पेपर करिए. आई थिंक यू वुड इमर्ज विक्टोरियस and I think we'll have a lot of happiness after CLAT. That is how I should put it. Finally, अच्छे से पढ़ लीजिए. It's time to go big, isn't it? From real to real. जो न्यूज़पेपर्स में और जो मूवीज में फैंटेसाइज किया था आपने वकीलों को, अब आप जाने वाले हैं उस दहलीज पे खड़े हैं जिसके पार जाके आप भारत के एक अच्छे लीगल प्रोफेशनल बन सकते हैं. इट्स अ टाइम टू गो फ्रॉम रियल टू रियल. इट्स अ टाइम टू मेक इट लार्ज. And most importantly, you have to bid for the best law schools of the country. So we need to understand that this day I should just focus on my 150 questions, 120 minutes, so that ये रील से रियल की यात्रा हो जाए. ये है ना, ये नहीं बनना है, ये वाला है ना, ये बनना है. ठीक है, ICJ. ऑलराइट, रील से रियल तक, है ना? हाँ, है ना? रील से रियल तक, परिश्रम से परिणाम तक। याद रखिएगा, परिश्रम से परिणाम तक। परिश्रम किया है आपने, हर बच्चे ने परिश्रम किया है, तो अब ये परिश्रम से परिणाम तक की यात्रा है। बस और क्या। ऑल द बेस्ट एवरीवन, स्टे लॉजिकल विद विधिज्ञ, योर बेस्ट पैल इन क्लैट प्रेप्स। याद रखिएगा, मेहनत करेंगे, करते रहेंगे, पॉजिटिव रहेंगे, एंजाइटी नहीं करेंगे, पेपर वाले दिन अपना बेस्ट दे के आएंगे और फाइनली जीतना तो हमें ही है। ऑल द बेस्ट एवरीबॉडी, गुड नाइट।